Easy, big fella. You're safe now.
300 soldiers went into that chamber. 0 came out standing. That is not a movie line. That is the recorded history of one event inside the Varathi Concord, the largest alliance of star nations in known space. It happened because of one creature. A beast so strong, so fast, and so terrifying that entire armies called it unkillable for years. No gun could stop it. No cage could hold it for long. No soldier could get close enough to even try second shot. Then, one ordinary man walked into its chamber. He carried no weapon. He wore no armor. And in front of hundreds of alien witnesses, the beast that had slaughtered armies went still. This is the reconstructed account of what happened that day, built from mission logs, witness statements, and the words of the one man who was actually there. Some small details are dramatized to help the story flow, but the core events are drawn straight from the record. In the next few minutes, you will learn 3 things almost nobody talks about. First, why every soldier who faced the beast lost in under 60 seconds. Second, why the conquered picked one unarmed man for a mission that was never meant to succeed. Third, the real reason the beast stopped fighting. It has nothing to do with strength. It has everything to do with something humans do better than almost any other species in the galaxy. If you are new here, welcome to HFY. That stands for humanity. It is one of the fastest growing story genres online right now, loved across the United States, the United Kingdom, and everywhere in between. It is built on one simple idea. Humans look small next to the galaxy. But we are not weak. We are just different. Let me show you exactly how this happened. Space did not care about human timelines. It had its own clock, older than every empire that ever tried to rule it. By the year humans finally joined the wider galaxy, hundreds of alien nations had already lived, fought, and traded with each other for thousands of years. Humans were the new kids. Nobody expected much from them. Most alien scientists filed humans under soft-bodied, slow, and easily startled. That reputation would not survive the story you are about to hear. The Varathi Concord was the closest thing the galaxy had to one big government. It was not perfect. It was a messy alliance of over 40 species, each with its own laws, its own fears, and its own secrets. But it kept the peace, mostly by sharing resources and standing together against bigger threats. Earth had only been a member for 6 years when this story begins. Humans were still proving themselves, still being watched, still being tested. Far from Earth, on the edge of conquered space, sat a dead world called Keshvanter. Long ago, before any human had built a wheel, an empire ruled there. Historians called it the Kesh Dominion. It was cruel, brilliant, and obsessed with war. The Kesh built weapons that no living scientist fully understood anymore. Some of those weapons were made of metal and fire. Others were made of flesh and blood. The Ashvale were the second kind. They were not born. They were made. Ancient Kesh scientists took the biggest, fastest predators they could find and reshaped them, generation after generation, into something new. Each Ashvale grew larger than a human transport vehicle. Their fur could stop most blades. Their claws could tear through light armor like paper. Their eyes glowed faint amber, a side effect of the process that gave them speed and strength no natural animal should have. But the Kesh did not stop there. They did something darker. They bonded each ash veil to one single handler, using a ritual that fused their minds together for life. The handler could think command, and the beast obeyed instantly, because in some strange way, they shared one nervous system. It made the ash veil the perfect weapon. Loyal, unstoppable, impossible to bribe or trick, because it was not just following orders. It loved its handler, in the only way a bonded ash veil could. Then the Kesh Empire collapsed. It did not fall to outside enemies. It tore itself apart in a civil war that lasted 11 brutal years. Palaces burned, cities emptied, and across 100 worlds, Ashvale handlers were murdered in the chaos, often right in front of their bonded beasts. Nobody planned for what came next. The Ashvale did not simply lose their masters. Their minds were ripped in half. Scientists who studied the old Kesh records believe the bond was not just command and obedience. It was closer to a second heartbeat. When a handler died violently, the Ashvale left behind did not just grieve. Something inside them broke completely. Most died of the shock within days. A small number did not. They survived, but the fracture never healed. They became something the galaxy had never seen before, an apex predator wrapped around an open wound that would never close. Any living thing that came near them was treated as a threat, because in their shattered minds, every stranger was one more soldier come to finish what the Civil War started. Keshvanter became a grave. For centuries, almost nobody visited it. Then, 12 years before our story, a pirate fleet made a fatal mistake. They landed on Keshvanter looking for old Kesh technology to loot and sell. They found something else instead. Survivors from that fleet described a nightmare. A white shape moving faster than their sensors could track. Claws that went through hull plating like it was cloth. In under an hour, the pirate fleet was gone. One escape pod made it out, carrying 3 terrified crew members and a recording that would later shock the entire Concord. The recording itself became infamous. It showed grainy helmet footage of a squad of 6 pirates advancing through the ruins of an old Kesh palace, laughing, joking about the treasure they expected to find. Then the footage showed a shape moving between broken pillars in the background, easy to miss on a first watch. By the 2nd minute, the laughing had stopped. By the 4th minute, there was only static, and a low, furious roar that investigators later confirmed was the loudest single sound ever recorded on Keshvanter. Concord analysts studied every frame for weeks, trying to understand what they were looking at. Most agreed on one unsettling detail. The creature had not attacked immediately. It had watched the pirates for almost 90 full seconds first, as if deciding whether they were a real threat, before it moved. The Concord military studied that recording for months. Eventually, a bold and controversial decision was made. Instead of destroying the creature from orbit, they would try to capture it alive. The reasoning was simple and, in hindsight, deeply foolish. A living Ashvale, they believed, could be studied, understood, and maybe even controlled again. In the wrong hands, that kind of weapon could win wars without a single soldier firing a shot. It took 4 separate missions and heavy losses to finally trap the creature and bring it, sedated, to a secure containment facility on the conquered capital world of Thessaly Prime. They called the containment chamber the Hollow Vault. It was built 200 meters underground, with walls rated to survive a small starship crash. It was not enough. Over the next several years, the Conquered tried everything. Scientists tried gentle approaches with food and calm voices. Soldiers tried force, sedatives, restraint fields, and eventually, weapons. Every single attempt ended the same way. The beast did not view any of it as help. It viewed every approach as another attack on what little was left of its shattered mind. Reports from that period use the word unstoppable so often that conquered officials eventually banned the term from official documents because it was starting to sound like an admission of defeat. By the time our story really begins, the numbers were staggering. 281 soldiers, scientists, and handlers had entered that chamber over 6 years. 281 had failed to walk back out on their own. Some conquered leaders quietly argued for simply sealing the vault forever and letting the creature live out its life alone in the dark. Others argued for ending it completely, calling it a mercy. Neither side won that argument, because a new idea walked into the meeting room instead. A quiet Concord scientist named Dr. Relin Vash, who had spent 3 years studying Terran biology, stood up and said something that made the entire room go silent. "Send a human." Nobody laughed. Not because the idea sounded brilliant. It sounded insane. But by that point, the Conquered had tried every other option they had. And somewhere on a supply station 3 sectors away, a man named Ethan Cole was about to receive an assignment that would change everything, though he had no idea just how much. Ethan was 34 years old, originally from a small town outside Bozeman, Montana. Before joining the Terran Outreach Corps, he had spent 12 years working at a wildlife rescue center, helping injured animals recover before releasing them back into the wild. He was not a soldier. He had never fired a weapon outside of a basic safety course. He had joined the Outreach Corps mostly out of curiosity, taking quiet jobs like cargo inspection, translation support, and basic animal handling consultations for conquered biologists who had no idea what to do with Earth wildlife data. Nobody in the Corps saw him as special. He was calm, a little shy, and easy to overlook in a crowded room. But that quiet, steady nature was about to matter more than anyone, including Ethan himself, could possibly have guessed. Most of the alien species in the Conquered did not know what to make of humans yet. Some found them fascinating. Humans built cities in a fraction of the time other species needed. They wrote songs about creatures that could kill them, and then went outside to feed those same creatures by hand. Conquered scientists filled entire archives trying to explain human behavior, and mostly failed. One popular theory floating around conquered universities was that humans had evolved in a strange middle place, not the strongest predator on their world, not the fastest, not the toughest, yet somehow still standing at the top of their planet's food chain. Some researchers believed that gap was exactly why humans turned out the way they did. Not brute strength, patience, cleverness, and, strangest of all to the rest of the galaxy, an odd, stubborn habit of caring for things that could easily hurt them. Ethan never thought about any of that. To him, it was simple. Animals were not evil. They were scared, or hungry, or hurting, and most bad behavior came from one of those 3 things. He had learned that lesson slowly, the hard way, starting with a half-wild dog his family took in when he was 9 years old, a dog that bit him twice before it ever let him pet it. His father had wanted to give the dog away. Ethan, stubborn even then, had asked for 1 more week. That dog slept at the foot of his bed for the next 11 years. By the time he joined the Outreach Corps, that patience had become something like a quiet skill nobody else around him seemed to share. He noticed things other people missed, The tiny shift in an animal's ears before it decided to trust you. The difference between a growl that meant stay back and a growl that meant I am scared. Please stay back. It never occurred to him that a galaxy full of advanced alien scientists might one day need exactly that kind of ordinary, hard-earned knowledge. The message came through on a gray Tuesday morning. Station time. Though on a space station, there is no real morning at all. Just lights that dim and brighten on a fixed schedule. Ethan was halfway through a routine cargo report when his console chimed with a priority alert marked for Concord Science Division use only. He almost ignored it. Priority alerts from Science Division were usually about paperwork, not emergencies. This one was different. It requested his immediate transfer to Thessaly Prime for what the message vaguely called a specialized consultation involving Terran behavioral data. No further details were given. Ethan read it twice, shrugged, and packed a single bag. He assumed it was another boring meeting about animal migration patterns or stress hormones in Earth wildlife, something Concord scientists loved asking him about because Terran biology was still new and strange to them. The transport ride took 2 days. Ethan spent most of it reading, sleeping, and chatting with a Concord pilot who kept asking odd questions about human heart rates and what it felt like to be afraid. At the time, Ethan thought the questions were just idle curiosity. Later, he would understand they were anything but random. When he landed on Thessaly Prime, 2 armed escorts met him at the platform. That was new. Ethan had never been escorted anywhere by armed guards before, and the tight, tense expressions on their faces told him this was not a routine meeting. They led him underground, through security checkpoint after security checkpoint, deeper than any facility he had visited before. The walls changed from standard station paneling to thick reinforced plating, the kind usually reserved for military weapons storage. Ethan started to feel the first real flicker of unease. Dr. Relin Vash met him just outside a massive door, marked only with a warning symbol Ethan did not recognize. Vash was polite, almost gentle in tone, but there was something careful in the way she chose her words, like someone trying not to spook a nervous animal. In hindsight, Ethan realized much later, that was exactly what she was doing. She explained the situation as simply as she could. A creature was being held beyond that door. It was extremely dangerous. It had killed nearly 300 trained personnel over 6 years. The Concord wanted to try something new, something that had never been attempted before. They wanted to see if a human could approach it without triggering the violent response every other species had triggered. Ethan asked the obvious question. Why him? Vash hesitated before answering. She explained that Terran biology showed something unusual under extreme stress. Most conquered species released a flood of chemical signals when frightened, signals other predators, including the ashvale, could sense and read almost instantly as aggression or threat. Humans, according to years of conquered medical data, had an unusually strong ability to slow that response down. Calm heart rates, controlled breathing, lower threat signaling even in dangerous situations, especially in humans with prior experience working closely with animals. Ethan's file, it turned out, made him one of the strongest candidates the Concord had found. 12 years at a wildlife rescue center meant Ethan had spent over a decade training his own body to stay calm around injured, frightened, and sometimes aggressive animals. It was not a skill he had ever thought of as special. To the Concord, it looked almost like a superpower. What Vash did not say, Not fully, not yet, was the deeper truth buried in the mission briefing. This assignment carried an extremely low expected success rate. Command had authorized it partly out of desperation, and partly because losing one low-ranking Terran contractor was, in the Concord's cold internal risk assessment, an acceptable cost if it produced even a small amount of new data. Ethan was, in the plainest terms, nobody wanted to say out loud, expendable. He was not told that part directly. He would learn it later, and it would hurt more than anything the beast itself ever did to him. For now, Ethan only knew the surface version. A dangerous creature. A slim chance to try something new. A choice that was, technically, his to make. He could have said no. Nothing in his contract forced him to enter that chamber. Ethan thought about saying no. He thought about the 12 years he had spent nursing broken wings and scared, snapping animals back to health. Animals that bit and clawed at him before they ever trusted him. He thought about one memory in particular, a wolf he had helped as a teenager, caught in a trap, half-starved, more afraid than angry. It took him 3 weeks of quiet patience before that wolf let him get close enough to remove the trap. Everyone had told him it was too dangerous to try. He remembered sitting a few feet from that trap every single day, not moving closer, just sitting, letting the wolf get used to his shape, his smell, the sound of his voice. On the 9th day, the wolf stopped snarling every time he arrived. On the 16th day, it let him set food down without lunging. On the 21st day, it finally let him close enough to spring the trap open. The moment its leg came free, Ethan expected it to bolt into the trees and never look back. Instead, it had limped 3 steps away, turned, and looked at him for a long moment before disappearing into the woods. He never saw that wolf again. Not up close, though local rangers spotted it twice over the following years. Healthy, wary, alive. That memory had stayed with him for almost 20 years, a quiet reminder that patience nearly always worked better than force, even when everyone around him insisted otherwise. Something about the way Vash described the beast reminded him of that wolf. What happens to it if this does not work? Ethan finally asked. Vash's silence answered the question better than words could have. Ethan exhaled slowly. Let me see it first. From a safe distance. Before I decide anything. They took him to an observation platform overlooking the hollow vault. Through reinforced glass 3 meters thick, Ethan saw it for the first time. It was massive, easily the size of a large vehicle, covered in thick white fur that seemed to shimmer faintly under the dim emergency lighting. Strange blue markings ran across its body in patterns that looked almost like circuitry, remnants of the old Kesh technology fused into its very skin. Its eyes glowed a dull amber, half-lidded, watching nothing in particular. It paced in slow, restless circles around the edge of the chamber, the way caged predator does when it has given up expecting anything good to walk through the door. There were scars across its body, some old, some newer, marks from tranquilizer darts, restraint cables, and worse. Ethan felt something twist in his chest that had nothing to do with fear. How long has it been down there? He asked quietly. 6 years, Vash said. Alone. Mostly. Ethan watched the creature pace for a long moment. It stopped once, lifted its head toward the reinforced glass far above, and let out a low, mournful sound that vibrated through the observation platform itself. It was not a roar. It sounded, unmistakably, like grief. "I'll do it," Ethan said, before he had fully decided to say it out loud. Vash looked surprised, and for a brief second, something like guilt crossed her face before she hid it again. "You understand the risk." "I understand it's been alone for 6 years, and everyone who's tried to help has come at it with weapons," Ethan said. "I want to try it differently." The mission was approved within the hour. Command moved fast. Before Ethan could change his mind, before certain uncomfortable questions could be asked too loudly, Ethan was given one final briefing, a short medical scan, and a simple instruction. No weapons, no armor, no sudden movements. If things went wrong, the containment field could be sealed within 2 seconds. Though everyone in the room quietly understood 2 seconds would likely not be fast enough to matter. A young Concorde technician handed Ethan a small comm patch to wear behind his ear, in case anyone needed to speak with him during the encounter, then hesitated before adding, quietly enough that only Ethan could hear, that he hoped this one worked out differently. Ethan asked how many attempts the technician had personally witnessed. The young Concorde officer looked down at the floor and said simply, "Too many." It was the first moment Ethan understood, in his gut rather than in the mission files, just how many people in that facility had already spent years quietly grieving colleagues lost to that chamber, and how much they all, whether they admitted it out loud or not, were hoping this strange, calm Terran might finally break the pattern. That night, Ethan barely slept. He kept replaying that low, mournful sound in his head. Somewhere deep down, part of him refused to believe this creature was simply a monster the way everyone described it. Monsters did not sound like that. At dawn, station time, he walked toward the hollow vault, alone, unarmed, carrying nothing but the same quiet patience that had once earned starving wolves trust on a cold Montana hillside years earlier. The security team escorted Ethan to the final checkpoint, a heavy blast door separating the observation corridor from the containment chamber itself. Beyond that door, the hollow vault waited in dim amber light. General Drat Kessun, the Concorde officer overseeing containment operations, met him there personally. Drat was an armored insectoid commander who had lost 11 soldiers under his direct command to the creature over the years. His voice was flat and hard when he spoke. "You do not have to do this," Drat said. "I know," Ethan answered. "If it moves toward you fast, we will not have time to save you," Drat continued. "I need you to understand that clearly." "I understand," Ethan said again, and something in his calm, steady tone made even the hardened commander pause. The blast door opened with a low mechanical groan. Cold, recycled air drifted out from the chamber beyond. Ethan stepped through alone, and the door sealed shut behind him with a heavy, final sound. The hollow vault was larger up close than it had looked from the observation platform. The floor was bare metal, scuffed and scarred from years of struggle. Dim lighting cast long shadows across the space. And there, in the far corner, the beast lay curled up, motionless except for the slow rise and fall of its massive chest. It lifted its head the moment Ethan entered. Every survival instinct in Ethan's body screamed at him to freeze, or worse, to run. He forced himself to do neither. He remembered the wolf. He remembered 12 years of quiet, patient work with frightened animals who had every reason in the world to distrust humans and chose, eventually, not to. He stood still, just inside the doorway, and said nothing at first. He simply let the creature look at him. The beast rose slowly to its full height, easily 3 times Ethan's size. Its amber eyes locked onto him, and a low growl rumbled through the chamber, deep enough that Ethan felt it in his own chest. Every recorded encounter before this moment had ended within seconds of this exact growl. Ethan did not move. He kept his hands open and visible at his sides. He kept his breathing slow and even, exactly the way he used to when approaching an injured animal that did not yet understand he meant no harm. He lowered his eyes slightly, avoiding a direct predatory stare, another small trick learned over years of careful animal work. Seconds stretched into what felt like minutes. The beast took one heavy step forward, claws scraping against the metal floor. Then another. Ethan's heart pounded, but he refused to let his breathing change. He thought of the wolf again, caught in that old trap, terrified and lashing out at anyone who came close. Until one day, it simply stopped. Above him, unseen behind the thick observation glass, General Drott's claw hovered near the emergency seal control, ready to slam the chamber shut at the first sign of an attack. Dr. Vash stood frozen, one hand pressed flat against the glass, watching Ethan's small, still shape standing just a few meters from nearly a ton of muscle, claws, and old, unhealed grief. Nobody in that observation room breathed easily. Every previous encounter, all 281 of them, had reached this exact distance before ending in blood. This one did not. "I'm not here to hurt you," Ethan said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. He knew the creature could not understand his words. He hoped, somehow, it could understand his tone. The beast stopped less than 3 meters away, close enough that Ethan could feel warm breath against his face, close enough to see faint scars crisscrossing its muzzle. Its glowing eyes studied him with an intensity that felt almost unsettlingly intelligent, far beyond simple animal instinct. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the beast did something none of the mission planners had prepared for. It leaned its massive head down, slowly, almost hesitantly, and pressed its muzzle gently against Ethan's chest, right over his heart. Ethan realized, with a jolt of understanding, exactly what it was doing. It was listening, checking his heartbeat, the same way Ethan had once checked an animal's pulse to judge its condition. The beast was reading him, searching for the same violent, panicked signals every previous visitor had given off. It found something different instead. A steady, calm, unafraid heartbeat. The growl faded into silence. The beast's massive body, tense and coiled for 6 long years, slowly began to relax. Ethan, moving with agonizing slowness, raised one hand and gently rested it against the side of the creature's face, right beside one glowing amber eye. The beast did not pull away. Ethan felt something warm and desperate rise in his throat, something between disbelief and heartbreak. This was not a mindless monster. This was a creature that had been alone, grieving, and terrified for 6 years, lashing out because every single person who approached it had done so with fear and weapons, confirming, over and over, that the galaxy was still a dangerous place full of enemies. Slowly, carefully, Ethan let his hand drift up toward one of the beast's large, rounded ears. He remembered, absurdly, how much that old wolf had loved having its ears scratched once it finally learned to trust him. He scratched gently behind the beast's ear. What happened next stunned every single person watching through the observation glass above. The massive creature that had killed 281 trained soldiers over 6 years let out a soft, low sound nothing like its earlier growls. It leaned into Ethan's hand, its powerful legs folded beneath it, lowering its huge body to the floor. And then, in front of General Drat Kesun, Dr. Relin Vash, and dozens of stunned Concord officials watching from above, the beast rolled onto its back, exposing its belly, tail thumping softly against the metal floor, in the universal, unmistakable posture of complete trust. For several long seconds, nobody in the observation room said a single word. Someone dropped a data tablet. The sound of it hitting the floor echoed through the silent room. Ethan knelt down beside the creature and continued scratching gently, first behind its ear, then along its jaw, exactly the way he once had with frightened animals back home. The beast made a low, rumbling sound that could only be described as contentment, its glowing blue markings pulsing gently in rhythm with what Ethan would later learn was its own slowing heartbeat. 6 years of pain, fear, and grief seemed to unwind in that single moment, not because Ethan had done anything extraordinary or forceful, but because, for the first time since the Kesh Civil War ended centuries earlier, and Ashvale had finally met someone who approached it without fear, without weapons, and without expecting violence in return. Later, when Concord researchers reviewed the full sensor logs from that encounter, they found something that made even the most skeptical scientists pause. In the exact second Ethan's hand first touched the side of Thren's face, both of their heart rates, recorded independently by separate monitoring systems, briefly synced into the same rhythm, a pattern normally seen only in long-bonded mates of highly social species, never before recorded between two completely different life forms meeting for the first time. Dr. Vash would spend months trying to explain that single data point in official reports, eventually settling on cautious language about residual Kesh bonding resonance, without ever fully capturing, in cold scientific terms, what everyone watching through that glass had already felt in a much simpler way. Something ancient had recognized something safe, and it had happened almost instantly. The way a candle catches when it finally meets a flame it has been waiting for in the dark. Dr. Vash, watching through the glass with tears in her eyes that she would later admit to no one, finally broke the silence over the comm system. "Get me full biometric readings," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "Now, before this changes." But somewhere deep down, even in that first stunned moment, she already suspected this was not going to change. Something ancient and long broken had, against every expectation, just been given a second chance to heal. News of what happened inside the hollow vault spread through Thessaly Prime faster than any official report could contain it. Within hours, it had reached every major conquered world. Within a day, it had reached Earth itself, sparking headlines and disbelief across news networks from New York to London. For 6 years, the beast of Keshvantar had been a symbol of fear, cautionary tale used by conquered military leaders to justify massive defense budgets. Now, suddenly, it was curled peacefully beside a quiet, unarmed human wildlife worker from Montana, and nobody quite knew what to do with that information. Conquered leadership reacted in very different ways. Some officials, particularly scientists like Dr. Vash, saw it as an incredible breakthrough, proof that the creature had never been a mindless monster, but a deeply traumatized survivor capable of trust and healing under the right conditions. Others, particularly certain military factions, saw something else entirely. They saw a weapon, finally under control, finally usable again. Ethan was given quarters near the hollow vault and encouraged, gently at first, to continue visiting. He did not need much encouragement. Over the following weeks, he spent hours each day with the creature, whom Concord records still simply listed as subject designation. HFY 7. Ethan hated that name almost immediately. It felt cold, clinical, the same kind of label that had likely been used on the creature's original cache handlers centuries earlier. He started calling it Thren instead, a name he had come across in old cache linguistic archives that Dr. Vash shared with him, roughly translating to the one who remembers. It felt right. Ethan had come to believe, based on the creature's behavior, that some fragmented memory of its original bond still lingered somewhere deep inside its mind, a memory it had been desperately, violently trying to protect from further loss for centuries. Thren responded to the name almost immediately, in a way that gave Dr. Vash's research team chills. Whenever Ethan said it, Thren's ears would perk up, and the faint blue markings across its fur would pulse slightly brighter, almost like recognition. As weeks passed, the bond between Ethan and Thren deepened in ways nobody fully expected. Thren began responding to simple vocal cues, not through fear-based training, but through genuine trust built slowly over shared time. Dr. Vash's team documented physiological changes in Thren's biology that stunned even the most experienced Concord scientists. Stress hormone levels, elevated constantly for 6 straight years, dropped to levels comparable to a calm, healthy predator in the wild. Sleep patterns normalized. The restless, endless pacing stopped almost entirely. Ethan settled into a strange new routine. Every morning, he walked down to the vault carrying a simple ration bar for himself and, over time, whatever fresh meat the research kitchens could provide for Thren. He talked to Thren constantly, about nothing important, about his old rescue center back on Earth, about the wolf, about the smell of pine trees after rain, a smell Thren would never know but seemed to listen for anyway, ears tilting toward Ethan's voice like it mattered more than the words themselves. Some afternoons, Ethan simply sat against Thren's side and read, and Thren would rest its huge head across his legs, glowing markings pulsing slow and steady, like a second, calmer heartbeat next to his own. Outside the vault, the story kept growing. Clips of the very first encounter, leaked from an unnamed Concord technician within days, spread across every major network. On Earth, talk shows argued about what it meant for humanity's reputation among the stars. Late-night hosts joked that humans had gone from the new, fragile species to the species that hugs murder wolves in under a month. Not everyone found it funny. Some Concord citizens, especially those who had lost friends or family in the earlier failed attempts, found the sudden public fascination with Thren deeply painful. A reminder of loss the rest of the galaxy seemed eager to turn into a feel-good headline. Dr. Vash tried to keep the science grounded amid the noise, publishing careful, measured reports on Thren's improving condition. But not everyone in the Concord shared her excitement. A military faction led by Fleet Admiral Corvith Tal began pushing for a very different plan. If Thren could bond peacefully with a human handler, Tal argued in closed-door meetings, then perhaps the ancient cache bonding technology itself could be studied, reproduced, and used to create new bonded war beasts, this time loyal to the conquered instead of a fallen empire. Tal saw Ethan not as a compassionate rescuer, but as a successful test case, proof of concept for a program with far darker implications. Admiral Tal was not, by most accounts, a cruel man. He had spent 30 years defending conquered border colonies from raiders and worse, and he genuinely believed a controlled, loyal HFY program could save countless lives in future conflicts. In his mind, Thren's transformation was not a story about healing. It was proof of a working method, one he felt responsibility to study and expand, whatever the emotional cost to one creature or one Terran contractor. It was, in its own way, a kind of logic the galaxy had used for centuries, the same cold, practical thinking that had turned wild predators into the original Ashvale weapons under the Kesh Dominion in the first place. Dr. Vash would later note, in a private research log, how unsettling it was that the very same reasoning that created this tragedy centuries ago had nearly repeated itself, dressed up in modern Concord uniforms instead of ancient Kesh robes. Ethan learned about this plan almost by accident, overhearing a tense conversation between Dr. Vash and a visiting Concord official who assumed Ethan, a mere Terran contractor, was not important enough to be in the room during sensitive discussions. What he heard made his blood run cold. There was serious discussion about relocating Thren to a secure military research facility, studying the exact biological triggers of the bond, and potentially replicating it, using other captured or newly created Ashvale for future military applications. Ethan confronted Vash directly that evening. To her credit, she did not lie to him. She admitted that some within the Concord military did see Thren as a resource first and a living being second. She also admitted, with visible guilt, the uncomfortable truth Ethan had suspected but never confirmed. His original mission had never been expected to succeed. He had been, in the Concord's own internal risk language, an acceptable loss, one low-priority Terran contractor whose potential death would still generate useful data. Something in Ethan hardened at that admission, though he tried hard not to let it turn into bitterness. He had not done this for the Concord's approval. He had done it because he had seen a suffering creature and, after 12 years working with frightened, wounded animals back home, he simply could not walk away from that kind of pain without at least trying to help. But he was not about to let Thren become a tool again, not after everything the poor creature had already survived. Ethan requested, and after significant public pressure sparked by growing media coverage back on Earth and across Concord space, was eventually granted formal status as Thren's recognized bonded handler under Concord law, a legal classification originally created centuries earlier for exactly this kind of ancient Kesh technology. It was a small, obscure legal provision that Dr. Vash had quietly helped him uncover in the old archives, buried deep in laws nobody had needed to reference in generations. The classification carried real legal weight. Under Concord law, a bonded Ashvale and its recognized handler could not be forcibly separated except by direct, unanimous council vote, a bar so high it had only been cleared a handful of times in Concord history. Admiral Tal's faction was furious, but temporarily blocked. Furious, and, as Ethan would soon learn, not willing to simply give up. The final confrontation came 3 months after Ethan first walked into the Hollow Vault. Admiral Tal, unable to legally separate Ethan from Thren, pursued a different strategy instead. He proposed an emergency council session, arguing that recent instability in a distant sector, blamed loosely on pirate activity near Old Kesh ruins, created a genuine security threat that justified reclassifying Thren as a military asset under direct emergency authority, bypassing the usual legal protections entirely. Ethan was invited to attend the session, an almost unheard-of privilege for a low-ranking Terran contractor, granted only because public pressure across Concord media had made Thren's story impossible to quietly ignore. Reporters from Earth and dozens of other worlds had picked up the story. Headlines across the United States and United Kingdom alike ran versions of the same astonishing image: a massive alien beast that had slaughtered armies, lying peacefully beside one calm, unarmed human. Inside the Grand Council chamber, beneath towering crystal pillars glowing soft purple and blue, representatives from every major conquered species gathered to hear the case. Ethan stood before them, and for the first time since this entire ordeal began, he was not afraid. Not for himself. He spoke plainly, without prepared political language, describing exactly what he had seen and felt during those first tense moments in the hollow vault, and every quiet, patient day since. He described Thren not as a weapon, but as a survivor of a tragedy far older and deeper than most in that chamber fully understood. A creature whose species had been created for war it never chose, then abandoned to grief it never deserved. You spent 6 years and lost nearly 300 people trying to break this creature by force, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. It took one person showing up without a weapon to understand that it was never broken in the way you thought. It was grieving. There's a difference. He paused, looking directly at Admiral Tao. If you turn it back into a weapon now, after everything it survived, you're not defeating whatever the Kesh Empire did to it centuries ago. You're finishing what they started. The chamber fell silent. It was General Drat Kesun. Of all people, the officer who had lost 11 soldiers to Thren years earlier, who finally broke that silence. He rose slowly, addressing the full council. I came into this expecting to argue for the creature's destruction, Drat said. I have watched the recordings from that first day more times than I can count. I do not see a weapon in those recordings. I see something that finally stopped fighting because, for the first time in longer than any of us can imagine, it did not have to. An avian representative named Chief Adjudicator Vel Antares, whose silver feathers caught the chamber's blue light as she rose, spoke next. She had opposed nearly every major Terran proposal since Earth joined the Conquered, often arguing that humans moved too fast and trusted too easily for a species so new to the wider galaxy. Even she, watching the footage played again on the chamber's central display, seemed shaken. I have spent years arguing that Terrans do not yet understand the true dangers of this galaxy, Vel Antares said slowly. Perhaps I had it backwards. Perhaps we are the ones who forgot that not every danger wants to stay dangerous. A murmur ran through the gathered representatives. Admiral Tal opened his mouth to object, then closed it again, sensing, correctly, that the room had already turned against him. One by one, other council members spoke, and the tide slowly, undeniably turned against Admiral Tal's proposal. In the end, the emergency reclassification was rejected by an overwhelming majority vote. Thren's protected status was not only upheld, but formally strengthened, with new legal protections specifically written to prevent any future attempt at forced separation or weaponization. As the session ended, Ethan felt a wave of relief so powerful his legs nearly gave out beneath him. He made his way back down to the hollow vault, now reclassified simply as Thren's living quarters, no longer a containment cell. Thren was waiting by the door, ears perked, tail already thumping softly against the floor the moment Ethan's familiar footsteps echoed down the corridor. Ethan knelt down, scratched gently behind one large ear, and felt, not for the first time, but perhaps for the first time without any shadow of fear or uncertainty hanging over the moment, that soft, Low, contented rumble that had once seemed impossible to imagine coming from a creature the entire galaxy had called unstoppable. "You did good," Ethan whispered. "You did so good." Above them, in the great chamber where the council had gathered, word of the vote spread quickly through the crowd of alien onlookers still lingering after the session. Guards, diplomats, scientists, and curious representatives from a dozen different worlds, many of whom had traveled specifically to witness, in person, the creature that had ended armies now resting peacefully at one man's side. For the galaxy, it was the end of a 6-year nightmare. For Ethan and Thren, it was only the beginning of something the Conquered had never fully understood, and was only just beginning to learn. Here is the detail almost nobody outside a small circle of Conquered researchers ever learned. Roughly 2 weeks after the council vote, Dr. Vash's team detected something unusual. Faint, dormant energy signatures, matching the exact frequency of Thren's glowing markings, flickered briefly to life on 3 separate long-abandoned Kesh ruin sites across different sectors of the galaxy, sites previously scanned and confirmed lifeless years earlier. The timing lined up almost exactly with the night Thren's stress markers finally dropped to their lowest recorded levels. The same night, Ethan later admitted that he had fallen asleep beside Thren in the vault for the first time, utterly at ease. Dr. Vash's working theory, never officially confirmed, was almost too strange to believe. If the ancient Kesh bond was less like a leash and more like a psychic signal, then perhaps healing that bond in one surviving Ashvale sent out a faint echo, a signal, reaching toward others of its kind who might still be out there, alone, broken, and waiting in the dark corners of dead worlds, exactly as Thren once had been. Nobody knew, not yet, whether more Ashvale truly survived somewhere across the galaxy. But for the first time in centuries, it was no longer an impossible question. The beast that slaughtered armies did not go still because it was defeated. It went still because, after centuries of grief disguised as violence, one calm, unarmed man finally showed it something the galaxy had forgotten it deserved. If this opened your eyes to what kindness can really do against seemingly impossible odds, you are going to want to see what happens next, because Thren's story, it turns out, was only Chapter 1. Let's bring it all together. A creature the galaxy called unstoppable was never a monster. It was a survivor, shaped by centuries of grief nobody bothered to understand. The Conquered spent 6 years and nearly 300 lives trying to break it by force, when all it truly needed was one calm, unarmed person willing to approach it without fear. And in the end, real strength did not look like weapons or armies at all. It looked like patience, quiet trust, and one gentle hand behind a wounded ear. If this story hit you the way it hit us putting it together, do us a huge favor and hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who love HFY stories as much as you clearly do. If you have not subscribed yet, now is the perfect time. We post new HFY Sci-Fi stories every single week, full of hidden empires, unexpected human strength, and twists you will not see coming. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter, including what happens when Thren's signal finally gets answered. We also send out a free weekly newsletter packed with behind-the-scenes story notes, early previews of upcoming HFY episodes, and community polls where you help choose future storylines. Link is right in the description below if you want first access. Before you go, we want to hear from you directly. If you were in Ethan's position, standing outside that chamber door, knowing the risk, knowing you might not walk back out. Would you have stepped inside? Drop your answer in the comments below. We read every single one. And honestly, some of the best story ideas on this channel have come straight from viewers just like you. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. We will see you in the next one.